G'day, chaps, tis I, Clampuncher139. Back when Arkham Origins came out in 2013, Warner Bros. Decided they need to milk every single penny out of this Arkham entry in particular. So they decided to put it on literally every system. Xbox, PlayStation, Wii U, PC, and for the first time, 3DS and PS Vita. Now, you might be wondering how they were able to put such a massive game on such an underpowered system. No, I'm talking about the portables. That's better. Now, how'd they cram the super beefy Arkham Origins onto these little things when Smash 4 couldn't even include ice climbers because the 3DS couldn't handle that many independently thinking entities? Well, they didn't. Alongside the release of the Arkham Origins we all know and now love, WB put out a much smaller sister game for the portables under the name Arkham Origins Blackgate. This game really flew under the radar and is generally talked about negatively when discussing other Arkham content, despite the fact that everyone racking on it probably hasn't even played it. Because I'm here to tell you that Arkham Origins Blackgate is actually really good. Now, as a quick disclaimer for this review, I'm playing the deluxe edition on my Xbox 360 because I don't have a 3DS capture card. As far as I know, nothing significant has changed, aside from slightly upgraded graphics and being able to play on a television with a controller that doesn't hurt my hands. That aside, this is pretty much a review of both versions, so feel free to grab whichever one is available for you. Also, spoilers for the entire game and story coming up later, I'm not going to reiterate myself. If you want to go in blind like I did, click away now. Alright, you gone? Then let's get started. Set around 3 months after the events of base Arkham Origins, Blackgate takes place during a mass prison riot. A bomb was set off in the complex, unleashing basically everyone from their cells. Now, Penguin, Joker, and Black Mask have taken over various sectors of the prison and are keeping hostages trapped in the Arkham wing below the holding cells. Penguin has the cell block, Joker took over administration, and Black Mask is in control of the industrial complex. Batman must conquer the 3 mob bosses so he can gain access to the Arkham wing and save the hostages, while Catwoman does some Oracle-like work behind the scenes to guide him through the prison. Yeah, Catwoman of all people is Batman's gal in the chair in this game. There's a prologue before this to explain why Catwoman's even in Blackgate, but don't worry about it. Anyway, pretty solid setup for a story. 3 of arguably the biggest villains in this franchise completely taking over Blackgate, and Batman having to bring it under control is pretty cool. What's also cool is how this story is even conveyed. Since this was originally on incredibly underpowered hardware, they didn't really have the ability to do cutscenes. So instead, they opted for a sweet comic book style to deliver the story. They clearly put a lot of time into these because there are a lot of them and they all look really good. They're able to convey the feeling of a comic book come to life, though do use slightly different character appearances than what we see in the game, but I don't really have a problem with that because it makes Batman look like Michael Keaton in most cutscenes, which is great. Best of all, they got all the voice actors we know and love, both from Origins and other games. Roger Craig Smith and Troy Baker are back as the incredible Batman-Joker duo.
Joker. Hello, valued guest.
Grey Griffin is reprising her city role as Catwoman.
Oh, I noticed. And my business never sleeps. I'm nocturnal.
Brian Bloom is back as Black Mask.
You hit the nail on the head, Batman. I came to this hole to close the books on my competitors, especially the Joker.
Nolan North is killing it again as Penguin.
Only the strong survive, like back in my arena. I intend to survive.
Along with everyone else they had return, like Gordon, Deadshot, Joseph, and more. They clearly put a lot of care into really making this a companion game to Origins, and not just a shallow port that meant nothing. They could have easily adapted the original Origins story into this game, used screenshots and voice clips from the game's cutscenes, and called it a day. But they didn't, and made something that really stands out and adds to the lore of this series. There's also the fact that you don't actually need any Origins knowledge to understand this game. It completely stands on its own, and really only takes the Origins moniker because of release time. It's overall a great standalone story. I'll get into more of the story in a little while, but let's talk about how the game looks. And honestly, it looks great. Obviously, I'm playing on a much more powerful console, but I looked up some 3DS footage and it looks just as good. I was honestly blown away by how dynamic certain aspects of this game were. Like, I was expecting a completely locked camera that at most zoomed in and out a bit. But instead, we have a lot of fun camera movement that adds a lot of depth to the simple 2D game. They could have gone the Metroid route and kept the whole game in a single 2D plane. But they didn't and actually made really in-depth locations with a lot of, well, depth. You can grapple into the foreground and background of many areas, the camera swivels to follow you around corners, and you end up feeling like you're playing a real 3D game quite often. Honestly, with the deluxe graphical upgrades, it looks like a traditional Arkham game, minus the fact that none of the characters move their mouths except Joker for some reason. Music-wise, they pulled a lot from the old Arkham library. There's music from all over the saga here, Asylum, City, and Origins. I think there's some original pieces as well, but it's hard to tell because there are no uploads of the OSTs, so it could all be taken from the other games. Which is why I've got generic Arkham music for the background of this video, sorry. Even still, they picked some of the best themes for this game, and the presentation as a whole was quite impressive. Overall, I'm honestly amazed they were able to cram all of this onto a 3DS. It's a really technologically impressive game. Although technology isn't everything. The most important part of a game is how it plays. Batman Arkham Origins Blackgate, despite its name implying otherwise, is not an Arkham game. It's just not. It's in the same series, but it is definitively not an Arkham game by any stretch of the imagination. Just like Kill the Justice League, despite being part of the Arkham canon, is not an Arkham game because it just doesn't play as one. What we have here is a 2.5D Metroidvania style game, rather than the 3D action beat-em-up puzzler. If you want something like the other Arkham games, this is not for you at all. In fact, it's almost a disservice to the actual Arkham games because of how they went about adapting their gameplay. Long story short, they didn't. Aside from Batman himself and the villains, nothing about Origins Blackgate represents the rest of this series. Combat is not combat in Arkham Origins Blackgate. It's unbelievably bad. You know how Arkham combat flows and actually feels good to use? Throw everything that makes it good out the window, and you've still got something better than Blackgate combat. Since it's played in a 2D space, you already lose a lot of the freedom that made original Arkham combat so good. Then you add in the fact that it's incredibly choppy, 70% of Batman's moves were just removed, and enemies barely attack you, and you've got something really bad on your hands. Sometimes you'll hit an enemy just fine, other times you'll teleport backwards and hit somebody else despite the fact that you were holding your control stick in the opposite direction. Countering is pretty much unchanged, except for the fact that Batman has the longest cooldown period after countering ever. The Cape Stun is the most useful attack you have, but it's impossible to use because it has no range and no targeting, so you're just hoping someone's close enough to hit. The dodge roll is absolutely terrible because it doesn't even come out half the time, so you just take ludicrous damage from enemies you were trying to vault over, and it's usually a roll anyway, not a vault over enemies. And then they just took away the rest of Batman's moveset. No aerial attack, no ground takedown unless you specifically used a glide kick or gadget on someone for some reason. No combo attacks, so your combo count is literally worthless except for getting achievements, and no quick fire gadgets. Alright, that last one isn't technically true, but you can't use them in combat, so point still stands. The point is, what we know as Arkham combat is not present in the slightest in Arkham Origins Blackgate. All those games with bad combat that existed before Arkham Asylum revolutionized melee combat, Blackgate is at least twice as bad. Except for Dark Souls. Anything's a better combat system than Dark Souls, don't at me. Okay, sorry, side tangent over. This was supposed to be later in the script with the rest of the gameplay, but I couldn't find a way to move it and make it flow well, so sorry. Now, let me be clear. This is not a completely bad thing. Just because Blackgate isn't an Arkham game doesn't mean it's bad. Because there's a lot to love here. Literally everything that isn't melee combat is at least decent to great. Like I said, Blackgate is a 2.5D Metroidvania. For those unfamiliar with the genre, Metroidvania is basically a big exploration collectathon, where you get stuck trying to go through an area so have to leave to find the one item that will let you get through it. As the name implies, the two series that made this famous were Metroid and Castlevania. And Blackgate is very much like these games. You explore the prison in a 2D plane, collecting gadgets and other useful tools to help you explore deeper into other parts of the prison. What this ultimately means is that I was pleasantly surprised with how Blackgate played out. Here's what I was thinking. I thought we were just going to go through each area of the prison one at a time, solving some really linear puzzles, fighting a constant slog of enemies, culminating in defeating the main villains in the same increasingly difficult boss fight 3 times until we regain control of everything. But that's not what happened at all. Blackgate plays out like a genuine Metroidvania, as you have to go back and forth between different parts of the prison to find new items and aid in your progression. It actually feels like a prison is in chaos, and Batman has to keep running around to solve whatever problems the villain may be causing or find a new gadget to progress. And it comes together to create a pretty fun gameplay experience. There's technically no required order for anything in Blackgate. You can take the villains out in the seemingly intended order, Penguin, Joker, Black Mask, or you can go straight to Joker first and complete more than half of his area before you get the necessary gadgets to go after Black Mask, then save Penguin for last like the speedrun does. There's literally no order to anything. You can go about completing the game however you please. If you're bored or confused with a certain objective in one story, you can just up and leave it and go for someone else. Best of all is that you'll never get stuck except by your own puzzle-solving abilities. There's never a wrong answer for where to go. You'll never get stuck if you didn't finish a certain villain's story first. At most, you'll have to leave to get a gadget from a different area, but then can go right back to where you were to keep going. Each area is designed specifically around the gadgets you get in that area, but usually has multiple solutions if you happen to have extra gadgets from other areas. And that brings up a lot of fun gameplay moments. There isn't really a difficulty curve in Blackgate. It starts out with middle-of-the-road difficulty and stays around there for pretty much the entire game. Because you can go in any order you want, you'll have different gadgets in areas you wouldn't otherwise think you need them. And these create some interesting moments of ingenuity. For instance, in the Penguin boss battle, if you played through all of Penguin's story first, only going to the other areas to get necessary gadgets, you'd have a bit of a tougher time, because you can't destroy the drones. But if you have the shock batarang from the middle of Joker's story, or the gel launcher from Black Mask's, you can destroy them and keep them out of your hair. There's a lot of little moments like that make this game well worth a second playthrough. As long as you go somewhere else to start, you'll never have the same experience twice. I will be completely honest though, the tutorial did not do much to hamper my expectations. Hell, I've already done a plot and gameplay breakdown without talking about the tutorial, it's that bad. Basically, the tutorial takes place 2 weeks earlier as Batman confronts Catwoman for the first time as she does some burgling. He ends up chasing her across basically the entire city as you learn the basic movement and combat mechanics. It's fine in that regard, but it's terrible for setting the stage for the rest of the game. All you do is move left to right, grappling around to keep up with Catwoman until you eventually get a boss fight. There's no exploration or even slightly alternate paths you can take, and started to bring my expectations for this game down quite a bit. These worries were thankfully averted when I actually got to Blackgate itself, but this tutorial didn't set the right tone at all. In fact, it confirmed my worries mentioned earlier. But I kept playing because content, and I was so glad that I did. So how do you actually explore Blackgate? Well, as I said at least 5 times now, you run back and forth in a 2.5D space. You can run, crawl through air vents, or grapple away to far locations. You use these in tandem with your gadgets to explore deeper and deeper into Blackgate's facilities. The deeper you explore, the more enemies you'll encounter, with the terrible combat system mentioned earlier, and the more gadgets you'll unlock. Speaking of, gadgets are pretty simple in Blackgate. You've got the usual grapple gun, batarangs, and batclaw, which do as we know they do. Although the grapple gun has the batclaw sound effect for some reason, not really sure why they did that.
Early retirement's looking like a pretty good option about now.
Then you got the line launcher, making its first canonical appearance in the Arkham saga with the tightrope ability, so that's pretty fun. And then you have shock batarangs, which do as the name implies and send an electric shock through whatever they hit, acting as a combination of batarangs and the rec gun. And then by far my favorite addition, the gel launcher. By God, I wish we had this in all the other games. It's pretty much exactly the same as the regular explosive gel, but with the ability to shoot at long distances and without Batman always taking forever to lay down a bat symbol. Add on top of that the later acquired glue ability, which basically gives you a glue grenade on top of explosive gel, and you have one of my favorite gadgets ever. As a whole, gadgets are pretty interesting and create a lot of fun puzzles, especially in this sewer area, which is a combination of Joker and Black Mask's hideouts, requiring you to use a lot of gadgets in fun ways for some really difficult puzzles. Oh, and let's not forget Batman's skeleton key to the prison, the crypto sequencer. It acts very differently compared to all the other games. Instead of finding a password or waveform by turning the control sticks, you have to find a passcode among a giant list of numbers. You're given one of the digits and have to find the rest through trial and error. It's simple, quick, and decently fun because of how it actually evolves as the game progresses. Aside from gadgets, the main collectible of Blackgate is sequencer codes. There are 3 in total that give you a wider access to the prison: Alpha, Beta, and Gamma. Beta is likely the first you'll get, which plays out the same as regular codes, just on a wider field. Gamma codes have a time limit before the whole board is scrambled, putting the code in a new position. And finally, Alpha codes have corrupt nodes that, if you hover over them, will cause the board to scramble, forcing you to carefully move around the board as you look for the correct code. These are all decently fun distractions from exploring, and a nice twist on the crypto sequencer codes from the other games. Although I must say, having them be so random is an absolute speedrun murderer. Now, my favorite aspect of Arkham, that being Predator, wasn't handled the best. But it certainly wasn't massacred like combat was. What we have here is an incredibly simplified version of Predator, very similar to what we got in Arkham Asylum. You've got vantage points, grates, and ledges as hiding spots, with silent takedowns, gadgets, and a few environment hazards for you to take enemies out with. There's usually a winning solution to most Predator encounters without too much room for improvising. But that leads to an interesting aspect about Detective Mode I forgot to mention. You now have a new Analysis Mode, which lets you more closely investigate parts of the environment. Sometimes things in the environment will not be highlighted for Batman to use, so you must use Analysis Mode to learn how you can interact with them and use them to progress. For example, in this Predator room, there are these light fixtures hanging above the thugs. However, you can't interact with them yet. But if you scan them in Analysis Mode, you learn that you can hit them with a Batarang or gel to knock them down and knock out thugs. This small addition adds a lot of immersion when playing, because it forces you to play more like a detective. Instead of Detective Mode giving you the answer right away, you have to actively seek it out with Analysis Mode. This is a really nice change that makes most of the puzzles more dynamic. It does get a little annoying later in the game, especially with all the weak walls you have to explode, since you have to wait for the progress bar to fill every time you analyze something, but it's overall a nice addition, especially to exploration gameplay. Speaking of exploration, one other Metroidvania aspect Blackgate utilized really well was secrets. There are a lot of hidden areas throughout the prison that you can only access via a second run-through with new gadgets. Scattered around Blackgate are little Wayne Tech crates that contain who knows what. Sometimes it'll be upgrades that are ultimately useless. There's armor and damage upgrades, which are great, but then there's this strange addition they made that seem good on paper but are honestly really stupid. I forget what they're called and was too lazy to look them up before recording, sorry. Basically, when you unlock them, they give you extra damage when you have full health and defeat an enemy, but are immediately lost upon taking any damage. Seems good on paper, it rewards good gameplay, but let's consider how many things can hurt you in Blackgate. There's enemies, obviously, but then there's a ton of environment hazards I haven't mentioned yet. Each area, for some inexplicable reason, has these spike strips that are really just there to annoy you. You're intended to roll over them, but the roll is so bad in this game, it's generally worthwhile to just take the hit running over them. Especially since they deal basically half a point of damage and you have passive healing when not in combat. They're honestly really stupid and the game wouldn't have changed at all without them. But then there's the villain hazards scattered around each area. Penguin has exploding bird cages, Joker has exploding gag teeth and laughing gas, and Black Mask has electrical surges. These are actually good additions in my eyes, because they act as traps to keep the player on their toes, especially Penguin and Joker's bombs. They force the player to be more careful when entering new areas, because there could be a dangerous trap just around the corner. And unlike the spike strips, these traps actually deal big damage and could kill you if you're not careful. But sometimes the collectibles, yeah, remember how that was the topic of this segment, are the one thing half of you seem to care about in this series: cosmetics. Or at least pieces of cosmetics. See, you have to basically explore the whole prison to find all the pieces of a costume before you can wear it. Frankly, I don't care about costumes, and I'm not 100%ing this save file for this tiny segment of the video, so just look it up on your own or play the game yourself to see what the costumes are. But as far as I know, the costumes do give you some kind of benefit during gameplay, so do with that knowledge as you will. I'll probably go back for a New Game Plus playthrough eventually, but I definitely need a break after playing this game 2 weeks in a row. Overall, though, good rewards for exploration. I can't really complain, and it allows you to use your detective skills a lot more than the base game. To my surprise, the bosses of Blackgate are mostly really good as well. Let's go through in the order I first experienced them, since you can actually fight most of them in any order you want.
What kind of girl do you think I am? Because chances are, you're right.
Not a great start, as you just dodge and counter a few times, then do some damage to win. But it is a tutorial boss, so I'm able to look past it.
I'm sorry, Batman, but I'm sure you do the same in my position.
I wouldn't be in your position, Turner.
Pretty similar to Catwoman, but a bit longer and slightly more in-depth. It did bring my hopes for future bosses down, since I thought they were all going to be the same after this. But I was pleasantly surprised, as you'll soon see.
Alright, lads, we got a problem that needs sorting out. So get sorting!
And now we just get a complete 180 in boss quality, because Penguin is freaking great. It's a full stealth boss in a large arena where the only goal is to take Penguin down. In your way, however, are the toughest enemies in the game. These guys can detect Batman when he gets too close to them, forcing you to stay far away and pick them off with other means, namely pulling their backpacks off, which will incapacitate them. Penguin is a great shot though, as he'll instantly give you a torso full of buckshot if you get too close and don't drop onto him. As phases advance, more enemies will spawn in, and drones will come in with spotlights. You can disable them with batarangs or destroy them entirely with explosive gel. But overall, it's a great Predator fight that uses this game's style of Predator really well.
And bad news for you, Bats. You definitely qualify as whatever else.
This fight just pisses me off. And not for the reasons I know you're thinking. This is a great boss that just makes me hate Arkham City Deadshot even more. This fight proves that we can have a hide-and-seek Deadshot boss that doesn't end in less than 15 seconds. You have to run around this arena constantly looking for cover from Deadshot's bullets. You can see exactly when he's going to fire, and he does it fast. So you have to be on your toes and book it to find the nearest cover while still making progress. You can use batarangs to hit spotlights into Deadshot's face, temporarily blinding him, but also taking your camera away. And speaking of, I love how we played through Deadshot's perspective. It's such a cool little addition that they didn't really need to do, but just adds so much character to this fight. It's overall great and just goes to show how lazy his fight in City was.
And speaking as a homeowner, I believe you qualify as a prowler on private property, and I'm within my rights to defend my property at all costs!
Honestly, this boss is awesome. It's a really dynamic fight that makes great use of literally every mechanic in the game. Joker will always run away from you to be on the opposite side of the arena, so you have to use the line launcher to quickly get across and kick him down. But after you hit him, he'll shoot at you, forcing you to dodge multiple times until he reloads, wherein you can hit him again. But eventually, he pulls out his stun stick, forcing you to either run away from him or hit him with a shock batarang to stun him. You can also lay out gel traps to stun him as he runs away, letting you get in hits and speed up the fight. And you need to speed things up in the final phase, where you're on a time limit against the gas, forcing you to use everything you already used, only do it faster or else you die. This is a really dynamic and fun boss that is definitely the peak of this game's design.
Grundy.
I really have no idea why Grundy of all people is here, let alone a boss, but here we are. Batman talks like the two have history, even though this should be the first time they're meeting, no? Maybe this is a comic where the two share a moment, I don't know. I think this boss should have been Killer Croc, especially with how you go about defeating him, that being electricity, but that's besides the point. Anyway, this boss is pretty fun. It's a really elaborate puzzle that was really fun to figure out the first time. It's obviously less fun on repeat playthroughs since you know the solution, but that's the case with every puzzle, no?
Come on now. Did you think there's even a prayer of you stabilizing these generators in time?
Much less of a boss and more of a really elaborate puzzle. It's a pretty interesting puzzle though, so I'm into it. You have to find a way to hit all these switches at once with the remote gel launcher, but to do that you have to go through this maze multiple times and lay down gel to wait. It's a really elaborate puzzle, as is actually finishing Black Mask himself, as one wrong move makes you the equivalent of a minigun target. I do wish there was a little bit more, maybe one more phase where we actually fight with Black Mask, but I'll take what we got.
This ends here.
I hope you've had your shots. We cats are delicate.
Yeah, Catwoman of all characters is the big bad of this game.
What a twist!
In case you didn't go play it for yourself, I'll give a breakdown of what happened. Basically, Catwoman wanted to get into the Arkham Wing herself because someone paid her to get someone else out of there. But she couldn't do that because the 3 bosses took over the prison, making the area inaccessible. Penguin locked the area off with armed men, Joker took the highest access security codes, and Black Mask removed power to the area. Catwoman relied on Batman to get in, and it's eventually revealed that Bane was the one locked in the Arkham Wing this whole time. See, Amanda Waller has been the one behind this whole outbreak. She had the bomb planted for the riot to start, and she was the one paying Catwoman to break Bane out. In the process, she also looked for new recruits for her secret task force, which we all know as the Suicide Squad. It's never revealed why she wanted Bane in particular out. I'm sure I'll have to look at the detective stories to get an answer to that, but it's still cool that this is kind of a Suicide Squad prequel, especially after we saw her trying to recruit Deathstroke in the post-credits of Base Origins. Anyway, the Catwoman boss is alright. Pretty disappointing finale, but it's nothing atrocious like Titan Joker. Overall, bosses are pretty good for this game. They're surprisingly elaborate, decently fun, and pretty difficult for the first time. Here's a quick ranking because I'm not going to dedicate an entire video to this. Number 8, Catwoman 1. Number 7, Black Mask. Number 6, Bronze Tiger. Number 5, Catwoman 2. Number 4, Grundy. Number 3, Deadshot. Number 2, Penguin. And number 1, Joker. No, I'm not placing these among my original list because, like I said, Blackgate is not an Arkham game. Plus, I'm at a clean 50, so don't take that away from me. Now, speaking of the finale, I know, segue out of 10. There's something so cool here that I don't think many people know about. This game has multiple endings. You heard that right. Multiple endings depending on how you played through the game. This isn't just multiple teaser cutscenes that play after the credits completely at random. This is 3 different ways the finale can play out depending on what order you play the game in. For context, I first played the game about a week in advance because I wanted a pure playthrough I didn't have to have the burden of also recording. In that playthrough, I beat the main trio in the order of Penguin, Joker, Black Mask. In doing this, my final mission after unlocking the Arkham Wing had me running around the prison to defuse bombs that Catwoman set with Black Mask's fuse boxes. Now during my second playthrough, which I recorded, I fought them as Black Mask, Joker, Penguin, which is what the speedrun does. In fighting Penguin last, the bombs I previously defused were replaced with hostages guarded by the heavily armed thugs you face in Penguin's fight, creating a whole new challenge just because I played the game a little bit differently. And just for the hell of it, I looked up a walkthrough that ended with Joker's mission, and it's also completely different. For Joker, you have to run around and defuse present bombs, forcing you to use the alpha encryption to defuse them in a short time span. They took time to create 3 separate finales based on what order you played the game in. And this isn't just reskins of all the same basic event. For each finale, you must run around all 3 of the buildings to help or stop whatever Catwoman decided to use against you 5 times. And they're different for each version. You go to different places for each objective and perform different tasks. That is an incredible attention to detail that not only adds replay value, but shows just how much the developers really cared when making this game. And it even ends with multiple different cutscenes showing what happened to the villains you defeated last, generally with them escaping in some capacity. Seriously, no other Arkham game can boast that they have different finales, can they? Hell, can most Metroidvanias boast that? That just makes Blackgate that much more special. Gameplay as a whole is really fun. You really feel like an underpowered Batman exploring an overrun prison, trying to make his way through seemingly impossible obstacles. While combat was absolutely destroyed, I'm able to look past that because it's not the main focus. This isn't meant to be an Arkham game. It's a puzzle platformer Metroidvania about exploring a prison. And it accomplished just that. Batman Arkham Origins Blackgate was a pleasantly fun experience that I was more than happy to go back and record for this video. I really wasn't expecting much from a supposedly cheap 3DS port of an already rushed game. But color me impressed with just how much effort clearly went into this game. Frankly, the cold reception it got is completely unwarranted. Yeah, it's a handheld port of a AAA title. Obviously, it's not going to be as good as the original game. That doesn't mean you can completely dismiss it as an effortless cash grab. Because this isn't some effortless cash grab. People put a lot of care into making this unique, different experience. Batman Arkham Origins Blackgate is not an Arkham game. So, you really can't judge it as one. There may be similarities to the other games, but it's ultimately not the same game. You're not going to put Doom in a review against Cuphead, or Grand Theft Auto against Breath of the Wild, or Getting Over It against Jump King, because they're two entirely different games that only share a small handful of mechanics. That's Blackgate to the rest of the Arkham series. It shares a small handful of mechanics, but is ultimately a completely different game. Yes, the combat sucks, but that isn't the point of the game. Most Metroidvania combat can be boiled down to look in the direction of the enemy and spam B until it explodes. This game at least had the decency to add some depth to it, even if that was ultimately to its detriment. It's not Arkham combat by a long shot, not even close to on par with Asylum, it's that bad. But it wasn't trying to be. It wasn't trying to have Arkham stealth either, because it knew it couldn't handle the deep intricacies that system entails. Swinging between gargoyles as you carefully observe your surroundings is still there, it's just missing all the takedowns Batman has access to because it's a smaller game. And it wasn't trying to have all those crazy interactions the other games provide. It only included these mechanics to make the game feel familiar. It needed to appeal to the wide audience the Arkham franchise had, and knew it couldn't do that in name alone. So they had to throw in these familiar ideas we'd seen 3 times already and loved every second of, in hopes it'd garner them some attention and keep the series connected. Unfortunately, the opposite happened. Because people thought they were just lazy rehashes of what we knew and loved, and assumed the rest of the game was going to be a lazy rehash of Arkham Origins, a game that already didn't go over well. But they were wrong. Because Arkham Origins Blackgate is anything but lazy. The developers put so much time and effort into the unique parts of this game that they just couldn't make the familiar parts any better. They took the time to write a unique story instead of just stealing what WB already wrote for base Origins. They had artists create fun comic-style cutscenes when they could have just stolen screenshots from Origins' already incredible cutscenes. They created a dynamic world that you can go through in multiple ways, with a camera that follows you around in a 2.5D space, rather than just a completely linear game where you run from left to right with no interesting level design aside from a bit of climbing. They made interesting puzzles that were not seen in the original games with unique gadgets and fun solutions, when they could have just given you some batarangs and called it a day. They made almost all completely unique bosses when they could have just had the same enemy reskinned multiple times over the whole story. They took the time to code in 3 separate final missions depending on which boss you defeated last, when they could have just done one and nobody would have known because most people don't play through a game twice to begin with. But they didn't do any of that, because they cared when they made this game, but nobody seemed to notice. They could have made Blackgate the cash grab tie-in everyone claimed it to be, and the fanbase would have reacted almost exactly the same way we already did. But they didn't, because they cared about this game. They took pride in their work and made a unique, interesting, and fun addition to the Arkham franchise. It's no Super Metroid or Symphony of the Night, but Batman Arkham Origins Blackgate is a damn fun time that needs a much better reputation than it's gotten. It's not an Arkham game, but that doesn't mean it's not a great game in and of itself. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later, chaps.